Millions in Syria and Iraq are facing water shortages as the region's longest river, the Euphrates, dries up.
The Euphrates River is disappearing, and the change is now visible across the land it once sustained. As the water pulls back, researchers are uncovering buried cities, preserved structures, and traces of civilizations that depended on it, revealing that the river was hiding far more than anyone expected. The river that should never disappear is vanishing. The Euphrates is drying in ways that are now measurable across Syria, Iraq, and the upper basin that depends on water entering from Turkey. River channels that once carried steady seasonal flow are narrower, slower, and in some places broken into disconnected stretches. Reservoir levels have also fallen, especially during years of heat and weak rainfall, and the pressure is now visible not only in satellite images, but in the daily life of people living along the banks. This matters because the Euphrates was never just a river in the ordinary sense. It was a working system that supported farming, transport, local trade, and settlement over a very large region. When a river like this weakens, the effect is not limited to water alone. It changes food production, population movement, and political pressure at the same time. This is where the shift becomes clear. The issue is no longer whether the river is under stress. The issue is what becomes exposed when a river that once concealed entire layers of landscape begins to retreat. In northern and eastern parts of the basin, low water has revealed former shorelines, damaged canals, older settlement traces, and stretches of ground that had remained underwater for decades. That distinction is important. Researchers are not only documenting environmental decline, they are also examining what the decline is uncovering. A practical example can be seen around communities linked to the river system in Deir ez-Zor, where water shortages affect irrigation, household supply, and local stability at the same time. For families already living with conflict, poor infrastructure, and rising heat, reduced river flow is not an abstract warning. It is an immediate structural problem, and that changes the meaning of the landscape. The Euphrates is no longer being viewed only as a symbol of the ancient world. It is becoming evidence of how environmental pressure, state decisions, and hidden ground realities can surface together in a single place during 2024 and beyond. The lifeline of civilization is breaking. For thousands of years, the Euphrates helped sustain the region known as Mesopotamia, where early urban life developed between the major river systems. Its floods supported agriculture, its channels supported settlement, and its reliability allowed cities, institutions, and trade routes to form in ways that would not have been possible without water management. Places such as Babylon rose within that wider system, not by accident, but because the river created the conditions for administration, grain storage, labor organization, and long-distance exchange. Now, this is where it becomes important. A river that once supported the structure of civilization is beginning to fail under a very modern combination of pressures: upstream dam control, reduced rainfall, hotter summers, damaged infrastructure, and long periods of regional instability. This matters because the historical meaning of the Euphrates has always depended on continuity. The river made settled life possible because people could plan around it. Once that predictability weakens, the foundation also weakens, and that changes the structure. What we are seeing now is not simply a natural dry period. It is the breakdown of a system that linked water, food, labor, and political control over centuries. In practical terms, this means lower crop output, more pressure on irrigation networks, and harder choices for families already living close to subsistence levels. A clear example comes from the wider Fertile Crescent, where the old connection between river flow and agricultural stability is becoming less reliable each year. In parts of Mosul Dam and the surrounding zone, falling water has also revealed archaeological remains, which shows how present-day scarcity can expose the material record of past societies at the same time. That distinction is important. The river is not only losing water, it is revealing the layers of dependence that were built around it. By 2023, the pattern was already clear. The same waterway that helped build early government and urban life is now under pressure from decisions and conditions those earlier societies never faced. The disappearance was not natural. The Euphrates was reshaped through direct human control across Turkey, Syria, and Iraq during the 20th century. Large dams, irrigation systems, and diversion canals changed how water moved across the region. What had once followed natural seasonal cycles became a regulated system controlled by infrastructure, timing schedules, and national policy decisions. Over time, the river stopped behaving like a continuous natural system and instead became a sequence of controlled segments, each governed separately. Now, this is where it becomes important. Once control is divided across borders, the river no longer functions as a single connected flow. Agreements such as the 1946 treaty marked a shift toward managed distribution rather than shared natural balance. That distinction is important. Climate pressure alone cannot explain the decline, because the river's structure had already been altered by long-term planning decisions. Each upstream adjustment reduced flexibility downstream, making the system more rigid and less able to absorb environmental stress. A clear example is the Tabkar Dam, completed in the 1970s, which allowed upstream storage but reduced downstream supply during critical periods. Farmers in lower regions began facing irregular irrigation cycles, forcing changes in planting schedules and crop selection. In some areas, traditional farming methods became unreliable because water arrival was no longer predictable. This created a gradual shift from stability to uncertainty across entire agricultural zones. In addition, large-scale projects such as the GAP project in southeastern Turkey further increased upstream control, redirecting water into reservoirs and energy systems before it could continue downstream. Each of these interventions added another layer of restriction, tightening the flow step by step. The river did not weaken suddenly. It was progressively narrowed, adjusted, and redistributed over decades, turning a natural system into a managed resource with limited resilience under pressure. The silent water war has already begun. Control over the Euphrates gradually turned into competition as demand increased after 1960. Countries along the river began prioritizing national use, reducing the volume reaching downstream regions. This placed growing pressure on areas that depended entirely on consistent flow for farming and daily life. Now, this is where it becomes important. When upstream control tightens, downstream systems begin to break under reduced supply. Iraq, positioned at the lower end of the river, started receiving significantly less water over time. That distinction is important. Reduced flow affects not just access to water, but also food production and land stability. In regions near Baghdad, farmers reported declining crop yields as irrigation systems weakened. At one point, tensions escalated toward possible conflict, with discussions tied to water shortages. External involvement, including Saudi Arabia, helped prevent escalation during that period. And that changes the structure. The Euphrates is no longer simply a shared river. It has become a controlled resource where upstream decisions shape downstream survival, turning water into a point of long-term strategic pressure. The collapse. No one stopped. The decline of the Euphrates continued even as warnings became more frequent. Water extraction, dam expansion, and irrigation demands increased across Syria, Iraq, and parts of Turkey throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. Each country focused on securing its own supply, often without coordination across the full river system. The result was a gradual breakdown of flow continuity. Now, this is where it becomes important. When a shared river is managed in separate sections, long-term stability begins to weaken. This matters because the Euphrates depended on balance across its entire length, not isolated control at individual points. That distinction is important. The river did not fail suddenly. It became fragmented over time, with reduced flow in some areas and overuse in others. In regions along the lower basin, especially near Anbar province, ecosystems that once supported fish, agriculture, and wetlands began to disappear. Local farmers reported shrinking yields and changing soil conditions as irrigation became unreliable. By 2018, several sections of the river showed clear signs of reduced biodiversity and disrupted natural cycles. And that changes the structure. The Euphrates is no longer a continuous system supporting life along its banks. It has become a series of weakened segments, each affected by separate decisions. The collapse was not hidden, but it continued without coordinated response, allowing long-term damage to settle into the landscape. The moment the water pulled back, everything changed. As water levels dropped further, parts of the Euphrates basin began to reveal what had long been submerged. Reduced flow exposed stretches of riverbed, older shorelines, and land that had not been visible for decades. This shift became especially clear during low water periods in Iraq and surrounding regions. Now this is where it becomes important. When water recedes in a controlled system, it does more than reveal empty ground. It exposes layers of history that had been preserved beneath it. That distinction is important. The retreat of water is not only an environmental event, it becomes an archaeological moment. A clear example occurred near the Mosul Dam, where falling reservoir levels in 2022 revealed the remains of an ancient settlement. Structures, walls, and sections of a long-buried city emerged after being hidden underwater for years. Archaeologists moved quickly to document the site before water levels rose again. And that changes the structure. The drying of the Euphrates is not only about loss, it is also uncovering physical evidence of earlier civilizations that once depended on the same river. What appears as environmental decline is also revealing how deeply human history is tied to the river's changing course. The lost city beneath the Euphrates. Archaeologists confirmed that the exposed settlement belonged to the Mitanni Empire, a regional power active around 1400 BCE across northern Mesopotamia. The site emerged as water levels dropped near the Mosul Dam, revealing structures that had remained submerged for decades. What appeared at first as scattered ruins quickly showed signs of organized urban planning. Walls, foundations, and large building outlines indicated a settlement built with long-term purpose rather than temporary use. Now this is where it becomes important. The preservation of these structures suggests the city was not gradually abandoned, but suddenly buried and protected. That distinction is important. The site includes palace walls rising nearly 22 feet high and measuring close to 6 feet in thickness, showing both defensive and administrative design. These were not simple dwellings, but part of a controlled center of authority. Excavations revealed multi-level storage buildings, fortified sections, and areas likely used for production and distribution. In some rooms, wall paintings in red and blue remained visible despite prolonged submersion. This matters because such preservation indicates rapid coverage, likely caused by a sudden event rather than slow decay. A clear example can be seen in the central complex, where structural integrity remained intact enough to trace original layouts and movement paths within the city. And that changes the structure. This was not a minor settlement along the river. It was a major political and economic center, integrated into a wider regional system. The Euphrates did not just support life here, it sustained organized governance, trade, and control, all of which are now being uncovered as the water continues to retreat. The discovery that shouldn't exist. Alongside the architecture, researchers uncovered a set of written records that had survived under conditions where preservation would normally be unlikely. More than 100 tablets were found inside sealed ceramic containers at the site near Kurdistan, each protected from water exposure despite years beneath the surface. These tablets were written in cuneiform, the administrative script used across Mesopotamia for record keeping and communication. Now this is where it becomes important. Written records rarely survive long-term submersion unless they are protected in specific ways. That distinction is important. Several tablets were still enclosed in clay envelopes, a method used to preserve official documents and prevent tampering. This level of protection suggests intentional storage, not accidental loss. The content of the tablets includes administrative lists, correspondence, and references to individuals such as Gimil Ninkarak, a known figure connected to regional governance. These documents provide direct insight into daily operations, economic activity, and social structure within the city. This matters because it allows researchers to reconstruct not just the layout of the settlement, but the lives of the people who lived there. And that changes the structure. The discovery is not limited to physical remains. It includes a preserved record of how the city functioned in real time. Instead of fragmented history, the site offers a continuous snapshot of an organized society, revealed only because the river that once covered it has begun to withdraw. The deeper pattern, nobody expected. The pattern emerging along the Euphrates is now being observed in other regions as well. Prolonged drought conditions in Spain, across parts of the Middle East, and during dry cycles in 2019 and 2022 have revealed structures that had remained hidden beneath water for decades. As reservoirs shrink and riverbeds recede, foundations, monuments, and entire settlement traces are becoming visible again. These exposures are not isolated discoveries. They are part of a consistent environmental shift linked to reduced water levels across multiple regions. As water disappears, it removes a protective layer that had preserved these sites over long periods. In submerged conditions, structures are often shielded from erosion, temperature change, and human interference. Once exposed, they appear in a state that reflects the moment they were buried, not a gradual decay over time. This detail is important because it explains why entire layouts, walls, and objects are being found intact rather than fragmented. A clear example can be seen at the Guadalpiral dolmen, which resurfaced after being underwater since the 1960s, revealing a prehistoric stone arrangement that had been inaccessible for generations. Similar conditions are now present along sections of the Euphrates, where lowered water levels are exposing settlement layers tied to earlier civilizations. These findings are not the result of targeted excavation, but of environmental change revealing what was already there. Across these regions, the same sequence is repeating. Water recedes, land appears, and preserved structures begin to surface. This process is ongoing, and each exposure adds to a broader record of how landscapes have shifted over time, linking present conditions directly to buried historical environments. The warning hidden in plain sight. The Euphrates has been referenced in historical and religious records for centuries, including passages such as Revelation 16:12 and early Islamic narrations describing changes in the river's condition. These texts were written long before modern water systems existed, yet they consistently describe the river as a boundary tied to wider regional stability. These references reflect how earlier societies understood the role of the river within their environment. The Euphrates was not only a source of water but also a point of control, shaping movement, settlement, and access across large areas. This perspective is important because it shows that changes in the river have always carried broader implications beyond local conditions. In recent years, especially around 2021, areas in eastern Syria and regions closer to the Persian Gulf have reported small-scale extraction activity in exposed riverbeds. These operations are linked to sediment movement, where erosion concentrates trace minerals such as gold particles. While limited in scale, these activities indicate how newly exposed land quickly becomes economically relevant. At the same time, the river remains closely tied to early settlement zones across Mesopotamia, where organized societies first developed. As water levels continue to drop, these areas are becoming more accessible for study and excavation. The connection between environmental change and historical exposure is becoming more direct, with each shift in the river revealing another layer of the region's long-term development. The Euphrates is no longer the stable river it once was, and that shift is now visible across the region it shaped for thousands of years. What once supported agriculture, settlement, and long-term planning is becoming fragmented and unpredictable. As the water continues to recede, buried structures and ancient settlements are being exposed. These discoveries are not isolated. They show how much of the region's past has remained hidden beneath the river for generations. At the same time, the decline is affecting present-day life. Farming systems are under pressure, water access is becoming limited, and communities are being forced to adapt. The same river that once supported growth is now reshaping how people live around it. What stands out is the connection between these changes. As the present becomes more unstable, the past is becoming more visible. The Euphrates is no longer only sustaining life, it is revealing what was built along it, layer by layer.